One organization that's gotten quite a bit of praise over the past few years for the way they've operated and run their drafts have been the Minnesota Vikings. A lot of people viewed Rick Spielman as one of the best drafters in the NFL, believe it or not, in terms of understanding how to maneuver in the draft board, how to work the draft board, how to move up, move down, be aggressive, get what needs to get done. And I understand it to a degree. You look at some of the moves he's made, and he's done very good for his organization in recent years. You get past Christian Ponder crap, for an example. But you look at the 2014 draft, it's a perfect example. This is a Vikings team that was able to get an impact defender in the top 10 in Anthony Barr and was able to accumulate additional picks while doing that, getting Cleveland to go from number 9 to number 8. And, they were still able, the Vikings, to get their guy in Barr, and then being able to maneuver up to the tail end of round number 1 to be able to get their young franchise quarterback in Teddy Bridgewater. Think about how much different the scope and focus of the organization is right now because of the fact they were able to maneuver and get up and get their 7th first-round pick out of the past 3 drafts, and this time they seem to have hit a home run at the quarterback position, something they failed to do in 2011 with Christian Ponder coming out of Florida State. Heading into this 2015 NFL draft, I was expecting the Vikings to be potentially aggressive players once again. I wasn't sure if they were going to be in the position to want to move back a bunch, if they were going to be looking to get a second first-round pick again. I wasn't really sure. But I was assuming they were going to focus on 2 things. They were going to focus on getting Teddy Bridgewater some help. You've got your young franchise quarterback. You got to get him some help. And then they were going to try and focus on rebuilding Mike Zimmer's defense in his image with his type of players. And you look at what they did. They kind of went out and did both of those things. They had a balanced draft in terms of what they addressed, although they leaned more heavily on the defensive side of the ball first. They started off their fun by taking Trey Waynes, the fast corner from Michigan State, with the 11th overall selection, and followed that up in round 2 with a player that I really liked a lot. I thought was a tremendous steal for the Vikings there in Eric Kendricks, the linebacker from UCLA. And then in the 3rd round, they took Daniel Hunter, the big athletic edge rusher from LSU. And later on in the draft, they were able to get some guys to help out Teddy Bridgewater on the offensive side of the ball. They got a guy in TJ Clemmings who, without his injury problems, might have been nothing worse than a very high 2nd-round pick. They got him at the beginning of round number 4, getting a tight end like Michael Pruitt, getting a wide receiver that could make some big plays in the slot and potentially in the return game in Stephon Diggs. This was a balanced draft for the Minnesota Vikings in terms of addressing both sides of the ball. Not a lot of massive reaches. So in some ways, I could understand why some people really like the draft philosophy of somebody like a Rick Spielman. Now, in terms of the best pick that they had, I don't think it was their 1st-round pick, Trey Waynes. I really think it was their 2nd-round pick, Eric Kendricks. Now, where is he going to line up in Minnesota? I've got to think he's going to get a stab, at least, at playing inside in that 4-3, I would think. Either way, he's a starting linebacker at the NFL level for a long time to come. I think he's the type of athletic 3-down backer that teams value and they look for, and I think he's going to be a big-time playmaker that my Bears are going to have to contend with twice a year in the NFC North. In terms of a steal, getting a guy like TJ Clemmings in round 4 now, maybe the stress fracture in his foot becomes a recurring problem, or he has other injury problems. This is a guy that could end up flaming out due to injuries. But this is also a guy with talent, with big-time upside, whose best football is perhaps ahead of him. And to be able to get a guy like him in round 4 has to be considered a really nice steal for the Minnesota Vikings. In terms of picks that I second-guess, I look at Daniel Hunter in round 3. You run the 4-3 in Minnesota. I'm not really sure Hunter is a defensive end, especially at 240, 245 pounds. I don't even know if he bulks up 15 pounds if he's a defensive end. Did you really need to take a situational pass rusher? And if you're going to take a situational pass rusher, was he the best situational pass rusher on the board? I don't think so. You're also not playing in a 3-4, so I'm just not really understanding why Daniel Hunter was the pick for them in round number 3. I'm really not. And then I even look at Trey Waynes in the 1st round. I think it makes a lot of sense on the one hand, because you're playing in a division where the Bears have Alshon Jeffrey and now 1st-round pick Kevin White. The Detroit Lions have Calvin Johnson and Golden Tate. The Green Bay Packers have Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, and Devontae Adams. If you're the Minnesota Vikings and you're trying to win the division in a different way via defense, You've got to get another corner to go opposite Xavier Rhodes to be able to kick Captain Munnerlyn in the slot to be able to match up with some of the firepower outside in the NFC North. With that said, I think Trey Wayne sometimes tested out a little better in terms of his 40 time than his speed actually showed on the football field. I have some concerns about his lateral movement and his ability to flip his hips and change direction, but this is a guy I also think is a little more physical than he's given credit for. I think he's a guy that could stick, but when I'm looking at it, my biggest second guessing of Trey Wayne's is that while the move makes sense and the pick makes a lot of sense to me for the Minnesota Vikings at number 11, you're staring Devontae Parker in the face. You've got a young franchise quarterback. You lack a true number 1 wide receiver in Minnesota. It's there. To me, you've got to take him. I had Devontae Parker rated as a better player and at a more pressing position of need. So it's not so much the hating on the Trey Wayne's pick as the questioning of not addressing wide receiver there, especially when the wide receiver was there, or maybe even an offensive tackle like an Andrews Pete was potentially there, because he didn't end up going until 13 to New Orleans. Now, I think they got 2 first-year starters on the defensive side of the ball in Trey Waynes and Eric Kendricks. So in that sense, they did well. I think they got some really good day 3 values in TJ Clemmings and Stephon Diggs. That's those guys in rounds 4, 5, 6, 7 that can make all the difference for your organization. I'm just not sure why they waited so long to address their offense. Again, Teddy Bridgewater is your franchise now. You might argue Adrian Peterson, but even if Adrian Peterson's back in 2015, you're talking about a 30-year-old running back, you have to transition to the Bridgewater era. Why would you wait so long to address the offense, period? Because it doesn't matter how good your defense is going to be. If your young quarterback doesn't succeed, you're going to be spinning your wheels and you're only going to get to a certain point. So I'm really surprised they waited so long to address the offense, and I'm really surprised they didn't address running back. And I'm really surprised that they waited until round 4 to address wide receiver. Or was it even round 5 with Stephon Diggs? Whatever the case might be. They waited until day 3 to address wide receiver and didn't address running back at all. So it was a really good wide receiver class, a really, really good running back class, and the Vikings missed out on both of them. So when you look at what they did in terms of waiting so long to address the offense and the fact that they waited so long to address wide receiver, didn't address running back at all, and didn't address offensive line, arguably their biggest need of all, until the 4th round, I think this was a middle-of-the-road draft for the Minnesota Vikings. It's not saying that they did terrible, but frankly, I thought they could have done a whole lot better considering their position and their circumstance. I got to give them a C grade on this draft, even if you factor in trading a day 3 pick to get a guy like a Mike Wallace. I mean, who knows what a Mike Wallace is going to be. Either way, you still had the chance to get Devontae Parker. I thought passing up on him was foolish. So it was a C grade for the Minnesota Vikings. They've done a lot worse over the years, but they most certainly have done better. This was just kind of one of those middle-of-the-road drafts. Like I said, you get 2 day 1 starters, first-year starters, in my opinion, in Waynes and Kendricks, and probably a guy in Clemmings who could start his first year or his second year for sure. But I'm not sure what else they're going to get out of this class.